I never imagined this would become my story. I never thought I'd be the one to destroy everything. I used to look at women who cheated and wonder, how could you do that? I judged them. I felt sorry for their husbands. And now, here I am, the villain in my own life. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how my husband came home early, with flowers and good news, and found me in the arms of another man. Our neighbor. That moment keeps replaying in my mind, like a scene stuck on repeat. It wasn't supposed to happen. At least, not like that. But maybe I should start from the beginning. Thomas and I had been married for nearly 10 years. We met when we were young, got married in our early 20s, bought a house by the time we turned 26, and had a child at 27. We were that couple, the one everyone said had it all figured out. We worked hard. We were kind to each other. We hosted holidays. Then our son got sick. Jacob was 6 when we got the news. Leukemia. A word that breaks you the moment it leaves the doctor's lips. As if someone took your future, squeezed it dry, and handed it back in broken pieces. Everything changed. Our life became about hospitals, test results, weak immune systems, and fevers. It felt like gravity had shifted in our home. Thomas turned into a quiet soldier, working extra hours so we wouldn't lose our insurance, scheduling appointments, learning medical terms, keeping everything in a folder, neat, color-coded, and exact. I stayed home. I took care of Jacob. I hardly slept. I lived on coffee, anxiety, and guilt. I loved our son more than anything, but I felt like I was disappearing. The house got quieter.
So did we, Thomas and I.
We became like coworkers in a crisis.
We weren't angry.
We didn't argue. We just passed each other in the hallways, handing over responsibilities, sharing small smiles between 4 treatments and late-night phone calls. I kept telling myself, this is what real love looks like. You survive. You stay strong. But deep inside, I was drowning. I missed being touched gently, without urgency. I missed being asked how I was feeling. I missed feeling like I mattered, outside of being a mother. And I hated myself for even thinking that way. Because how could I want more? When our child was fighting to stay alive. Chris moved in at the beginning of spring. He was in his 40s, lived alone, quiet, kind, always waved hello. At first, it was nothing. He helped carry groceries once, brought over soup when Jacob was in the hospital, fed our cat when we were gone for 5 days. Honestly, I was just thankful. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer awkward sympathy. He simply showed up. Then one day, I broke down in front of him. It was silly. I dropped a laundry basket in the driveway. Clothes spilled everywhere. He walked over, picked up one of Jacob's shirts, and asked if I was okay. That was it. I broke down crying on the sidewalk, mascara running down my face. He didn't say much. He just knelt beside me and said, "You don't have to hold it all together right now." That one line opened something inside me. Because no one, not even Thomas, had said that in months. After that, Chris started appearing more often. Never in a strange or inappropriate way. He never crossed any boundaries. He would wave when I watered the plants, ask about Jacob, bring coffee by accident. I told myself it was just kindness. Then I started putting on a little makeup before checking the mail.
Just a little in case he was outside.
I noticed when he complimented my dress. And I hated that I noticed. I hated that I liked it. But I didn't stop. I told Thomas once, "I feel like I'm disappearing." He nodded and said, "We'll get through this." I know he meant it. But what I heard was, "You're strong. Don't fall apart." So I didn't. At least not in front of him. It was a Tuesday afternoon, when things went too far. Thomas was working late again. Jacob was asleep upstairs. I had just finished folding laundry and sat outside for a breath. Chris came over and asked if I was okay. I said, "I don't know anymore. I don't remember who reached first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was me." But suddenly, we were closer than ever. Our arms brushed. I didn't pull away.
He looked at me.
I looked back. And I didn't say no. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, and it changed everything. The next day, I promised myself it wouldn't happen again. It was a moment, a weak, selfish moment. I felt awful about it. But then Thomas left for a business trip. Jacob was spending the weekend at my parents' house, and Chris knocked on the door. I told myself it was just a talk, just to sit with someone. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't true. Chris stood there with a soft smile, like he was silently asking for permission. And I didn't say no. I stepped aside. He walked in. The house was quiet. No cartoons playing. No alarms or medical beeps. Just silence.
And space.
I offered him tea.
He said yes.
We didn't talk much. We sat at the table, sipping cheap peppermint tea, avoiding each other's eyes. Then he said, "I haven't seen you smile in a long time." I laughed softly, awkwardly. "Not a lot to smile about," I said softly. He didn't respond. Instead, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. And I didn't pull away. Do you want me to say I resisted? That I said no? That I came to my senses? I didn't. Because in that moment, I was just tired. Tired of being strong. Tired of being someone else's anchor. Tired of holding everything and everyone together. I just wanted to feel something. Something that wasn't grief, or pressure, or guilt, or the numbness I had grown used to. So when he leaned in, I didn't stop him. And when we kissed, I kissed him back. It wasn't wild. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't like the movies. It was slow, soft, and deeply sad. Two broken people clinging to whatever warmth they could find in the wreckage of their lives. And when it was over, I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed Thomas and I once shared, and I cried. Not because I regretted it. Not yet. But because I knew something had shifted inside me. Something I couldn't unshift. Something I couldn't undo. Chris didn't say anything. He just got dressed, kissed the top of my head, and left. And I was alone. The next morning, I cleaned the sheets twice, opened all the windows, vacuumed a rug that didn't need vacuuming. I tried to erase the air. Later that day, Thomas called. His voice was calm, tired.
"Hey," he said.
"I've got some good news." I held my breath. Jacob's latest scans were in. Everything was clear. He was in remission. And just like that, the world stopped spinning. I should have screamed, cried, jumped for joy. But instead, I felt this cold, gnawing dread in the pit of my stomach. Because Thomas was coming home. And I wasn't the woman he left behind. He said he wanted to surprise me. Said he'd leave work early, bring flowers, take me to dinner. Said we deserved something to celebrate. I told him not to bother. I'd cook. Jacob was tired. The house was a mess. But he insisted. Of course he did. Because Thomas always shows up. That's who he is. I don't know why I let Chris come over that afternoon. Maybe some part of me wanted to sabotage everything. Maybe I thought I could pretend it hadn't happened. Maybe I didn't believe Thomas would actually come home early. I don't know. But Chris knocked, and I opened the door again. We sat in the kitchen and talked about meaningless things. The weather, his dog, a story from when he was stationed overseas. And then, just like before, we kissed. Only this time, it didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a choice. And that's when the front door opened. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard keys hit the counter. His voice, casual and light. "Claire, you won't believe the traffic." Then silence. And I knew. I knew before I turned around. I knew from the way the air shifted. From the stillness in the room. I turned and saw him, standing in the doorway. A bouquet of yellow tulips in one hand. A plastic bag from the pharmacy in the other. His eyes went from me, to Chris, to the bed behind us. And they didn't blink. Chris stood up quickly and muttered something like, "Thomas, man, this isn't." But Thomas didn't look at him. He looked at me. And I swear to God, I have never seen so much pain in one man's face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even betrayal. It was devastation. Like someone had cut the air out of his lungs, and he didn't know how to breathe anymore. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I reached for him. Instinct, panic. But he took a step back. Just one.
And that was enough.
He didn't speak. He didn't yell. He just looked at me, then down at the flowers in his hand, and gently laid them on the counter. Then he walked out the door. I stood there frozen, naked in more ways than one. Chris mumbled something and left too, but I barely heard him. The only sound that echoed in my ears was the soft click of the front door closing. And that silence after? It was louder than any scream. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stood there, in the middle of the room, my skin still warm from someone else's hands, my heart somewhere between my stomach and the floor. I thought about running after him. I thought about calling his name. But what was I going to say? Wait, it's not what it looked like? Because it was exactly what it looked like. So I stayed there, wrapped in a sheet and shame, and just stopped existing for a little while. Thomas didn't come home that night. He didn't text, didn't call,
Didn't ask about Jacob.
and the strange thing was, I didn't blame him. Some part of me, the part of me that still had a soul, knew I didn't deserve even the grace of his anger. Because anger means you still care. But silence? Silence is final. Jacob was at my parents' house that weekend. Thank God. I don't know what I would have said if he had come home to that tension, that void. I spent the night on the couch. Didn't sleep. Didn't move. Just stared at the flowers Thomas brought, the yellow tulips. He remembered they were my favorite. They were still in the grocery store wrapper, leaning in the kitchen sink like they were waiting to be rescued. And I couldn't even look at them. I threw the flowers out the next morning, not to forget, but because every time I saw them, I felt like screaming. The next day, Thomas still didn't come back. Instead, he sent a single text.
He can stay with you this week.
I'll pick him up next Friday. That was it. No name. No anger. No, you cheated, or how could you? Just cold, emotionless logistics. And somehow, that hurt even more. Because I knew what it meant. It meant he'd already shifted. From husband to co-parent. From love to duty. My mom could sense something was wrong. She called that night and asked, "Did you two have a fight?" I said, "Yes. That's all." She didn't press further. She just said, "Jacob had a good day. He's asking for you." And that broke me. Not quiet movie scene tears, but full body, soul-shaking sobs. I cried on the kitchen floor, the stairs, in the shower, in Jacob's empty bed. Every room felt haunted by the woman I used to be, and none of it mattered anymore. Thomas came by a few days later, not to talk, not to argue, just to pick up some clothes. He texted first, "I'll be there at 6. Please don't be home." So I left. I parked down the block, heart pounding like a teenager sneaking out. I watched the lights turn on in our bedroom. I watched him walk out with a duffel bag and a couple shirts on hangers. He moved slowly, not because he was tired, but because he was broken. And I had broken him. I tried to write him a letter, a real one. I made tea, lit a candle like I was about to perform some sacred ritual. But every time I picked up the pen, my hand froze. What do you say to a man you've shattered? Sorry, I didn't mean to, but I did. I opened that door.
Twice.
When Jacob came home, I cleaned the house like a woman possessed. Washed the sheets 3 times. Scrubbed the walls. Reorganized the pantry. Not for hygiene, for redemption. As if making the place spotless could erase the memory of what I had done. Jacob ran into my arms like nothing had changed. That shattered me even more.
To him, I was still mom.
Still the one who made his cereal, packed his lunch, kissed him goodnight. He didn't know I was the reason Daddy didn't come home anymore. And I didn't know how long I could keep it that way. Thomas and I stopped speaking. We only texted about Jacob. Just the basics, school pickups, drop-offs, doctor's appointments.
He never asked how I was.
And I didn't tell him.
But I wanted to.
Some nights, I'd stare at a blank message screen for 20 minutes, typing and deleting. What could I even say? I'm sorry. He already knew. It was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was a choice. And choices have consequences. The worst part? I didn't even end up with Chris. He stopped coming around, stopped texting, couldn't look me in the eye when we crossed paths. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he was a coward. But I didn't chase him because it was never really about him. It never was. One night, I drove past Thomas's apartment. Told myself I just wanted to see if he was okay. But that was a lie. There was another car in the driveway. Small.
Red.
Definitely not his. I sat there in the dark, fingers clenched around the steering wheel, chest hollow. And I realized he was already starting over. And I was still standing in the ruins. It's been 7 months. 7 months since Thomas walked through the door with yellow tulips and the best news of our lives. And walked out with everything I didn't know I was about to lose. People ask if time heals. I don't know. Some wounds don't heal. They scar. You learn to carry the pain. You stop hoping things will go back to the way they were.
You learn to stay quiet.
Especially when it's your fault. I still live in the same house. Same rooms. Same furniture. Same photos on the walls. Jacob's drawings still hang on the fridge. Our wedding photo is still in the hallway. I've thought about taking it down 100 times. But I can't. Because removing it feels like erasing a life I once had. And even if I did, the guilt would still be here. Photos don't lie. But people do. Jacob adjusted quicker than I did. Kids are resilient, they say. He doesn't cry when Thomas leaves anymore. And Thomas, he's still kind. He smiles at Jacob, gives him high fives, picks him up on time. But he doesn't look at me. And when he does, it's fleeting, like I'm a stranger he once knew in another life. And maybe I am. Maybe the woman he loved died the day I opened that door. I tried therapy. 3 sessions. The therapist asked, "What do you want out of this?" I said, "To stop hating myself." She said, "That's a good place to start." But I never went back. Some days, I think I should hate myself. Some days, the guilt feels like the punishment I deserve. I haven't spoken to Chris since it happened. He moved out 2 months after everything fell apart. Said he wanted a fresh start. I never even asked where he went. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for helping me destroy my life. Good luck doing it to someone else. I didn't need closure from him. I needed it for myself. And I still haven't found it. The worst part? I miss Thomas. Not just as my husband, but as him. His corny jokes. The way he used to kiss the top of my head while I was cooking. How he'd leave post-it notes tucked inside my books. He was good. Solid.
Loyal.
And I treated him like background noise. Until the day he went silent. Sometimes I catch myself checking his Instagram. He doesn't post much, but every now and then there's a picture, him and Jacob at the park, or building Legos on the living room floor. He looks happy. Or maybe just okay. And I know I should be happy for him. But instead, I feel this painful tightness in my chest. It's not jealousy. Not really. It's the ache of no longer being part of that picture. Of knowing I traded something whole for something empty. If I could talk to him again. Really talk, I don't even know what I'd say. I wouldn't ask for another chance. Because I don't deserve one. I just want him to know.
I'm sorry.
Not in the casual, offhand way people say sorry. But in the way you whisper it to yourself at 2 a.m. when the silence is louder than the guilt. I'm sorry I broke us. I'm sorry I threw away the man who stood by me through every storm. I'm sorry I made him feel invisible while chasing the illusion of being seen. I'm sorry that Jacob now has to grow up with 2 houses because I couldn't keep mine together. I know he'll never read this. Never hear it. But if he ever did, there's one thing I'd want him to know. I never stopped loving you. Even when I let you go. Even when I failed to show it. Even when I did the one thing you could never forgive. I loved you then. I love you still. So now, I wake up each day. Pour cereal. Pack Jacob's lunch. Help with homework. Fold laundry. Life goes on, even when your heart doesn't know how to keep up. But I do it for him. For our son. Because if I couldn't be the wife Thomas deserved, I'll be the mother Jacob needs. Some nights, when the house is quiet, I sit at the kitchen table, the same one where Thomas once laid down flowers, and I talk to him in my mind. I tell him about Jacob's new drawings, about how the neighbor's dog had puppies, about how I haven't let anyone else in the house since he left. It probably sounds silly, but it helps me breathe. Because grief doesn't only come from death. Sometimes it comes from choices you made with your own hands. And sometimes there's no fixing it. This is my story. Not one I'm proud of, but one I carry with me every single day. Because pain fades, but consequences? They stay. And so do I. Still here. In the house I once called home. Living in the echoes of everything I destroyed.